Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone to our event for August. We appreciate everyone. It's good to see everyone here today. We have Dr. John Stinnett with us, who is a 1999 graduate of Franklin University. So we're really excited to have him. Many know and probably have already seen a few of his presentations. We've actually done a kind of a spin-off of this presentation before. Project management in your personal and professional lives. It's one of my favorite events that we do because it's something that you can really take that's tangible and use in your everyday life. So we're really excited to have everyone. We will continue to get people. This is going to be recorded. We're looking to put more of our recordings up online for people to go back and review. So more information will come on that. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. Dr. Stinnett will address this when he starts. If he wants to take questions through chat or if we want to use hands, I'm happy to monitor either one of them and we can go or we can hold till the end for questions. Also, for events that are upcoming, you can always go to franklin.edu/alumni and you can check out our events. Next month, we have our annual leadership symposium. And so that's going to be a really, really good topic as far as, kind of leading into the future after the pandemic and what that looks like. And then our upcoming sales speaker series is Turn Transparency into Your Sales Superpower. So again, that is a donor-funded program that we have through our sales speaker series. So make sure that you check it out as well. Also, we have our podcast each and every month. With all that being said, I am going to go ahead and introduce our guest of honor today, Dr. John Stinnett. Extensive experience in project management, program management, applied leadership. Currently, he serves as the executive director of JP Morgan Chase, where he leads a team of project managers and focusing on organizational redesign, learning and development programs. He's also a senior instructor for the Project Management Institute and adjunct faculty for Syracuse, Ashland, and Franklin Universities. Also just an all-around nice guy. One of my favorite presenters and one of my favorite guys to hang out with. So with that, Dr. Stinnett, I am going to turn it over to you. And again, we're so glad to see everyone here today.
Aaron, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. Welcome. Just a confirmation. Can we see the screen that I'm sharing, making sure we did a handoff there? That's all good.
We can.
Thank you. You know, Franklin is so near and dear to my heart, as Aaron was talking about, not only a graduate of the MBA program, but also as an adjunct faculty member since 2004. And so it is wonderful looking through some of the names I see and recognize some of you over the years. And so I'm just thrilled that you're here. And thank you for that. And we'll talk about a number of things today in this workshop. And, you know, it's one of these things I ask Aaron every year, can I have 4 hours to do this? And he gives me an hour. And so we're going to talk about how the discipline, the tools, the techniques of project management, about how that's not something just for those who are sitting in a project management role, but rather how can you use that to increase and enhance your success, not only in your professional life, but also in your personal life? And so today we're going to talk about these different things. We'll talk about these different terms: scope, time, cost, quality, as we go through that. And we'll put it all together a bit as we get to wrap up. But one of the first things we have to start with is this idea of is anyone here a project manager? And believe, I'd love to have all of your cameras on if you're so inclined, just so I can see you raise your hand, because the answer is that we're all a project manager, and everyone here should raise your hand because you're the project manager of your own life. And so your career, your family, your friends, any of your personal things, the goals that you have, you're the project manager of that. And it might be useful to start with this idea of, well, what is a project? Let's be clear. You're calling me a project manager, John, but what does that mean for me? Well, first, a project is, by our Project Management Institute definition, a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Okay. When I talk to project managers about this topic or this definition, I talked about there's two key elements there, that for it to be a project, it must be temporary, meaning it has a beginning and an end. And then we're creating something unique. When we have something unique, something we haven't done before, because if you think about traditional project management, once we deliver the thing, once we figure out how to make the car the first time, Then we operationalize it and we make thousands or hundreds of thousands of those. That becomes an operation. So a project is temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. The reason that that's important for you is because I'm going to give you some examples of how I think you are the project management for your own self. And so this idea that how many of you have ever built a house, planned a wedding, preparing for a baby, right? Going on vacation, cleaning out a basement or garage, any of those things are all projects. Going on vacation is my favorite project. And as Aaron said earlier, I love to have interaction as we're going. So if you've got a question or comment, please put it in the chat and I'll try to make sure that I'm ready for that as well. And then Aaron can help me with that as we go, but you're welcome to do that, please, as we're thinking about it. All of these things that we do are projects. Generally, they're temporary in nature, and we're creating something unique. And one thing as a Franklin alumni that I want you to think about is that going to school, earning your degree is a project. And I like to tell current students when I'm talking to them that you're the project manager of this career that you're pursuing by going and getting your degree. And so as you think about it in that way, any of these pursuits can help you be successful, more successful, if you're leveraging the things we're going to talk about in this workshop. And I had someone in our last workshop say, well, I want to do a triathlon. Is that a project? Absolutely. A triathlon is an amazing event that requires practice, organization, skill, planning, implementation, all those things. So any of these things that you're doing in your life is this idea that it's a project. And the key is that you're the project manager. You're the owner of that project. And we have many projects in our lives. So a couple of things I can get you hopefully excited about why I recommend that you approach all these things in your life that you're doing, not as something casual, but rather very intentional. And the first one of why I'm suggesting we use this is because when we leverage project management, we visualize the process and not just the outcome. So when we visualize the outcome, students say to me, I want an A in this class. Well, what does that mean to you? Earning an A is just an outcome. What's the process to earn that A? To earn that A, you need to think about, I have to complete my readings. I have to study. I have to review material. I have to attend a live session, participate in my discussion boards, and you start documenting the process that it goes through. We know from many studies that we're much more likely to succeed when we visualize the process. And project management tools and techniques through this presentation today, through this workshop, help you visualize the process. In fact, they force you to visualize the process, not just knowing the outcome. Another reason to talk about this topic is that it's this idea of a planning fallacy, is that we as humans tend to be overly optimistic about what we can accomplish. Meaning that we'll say, maybe someone at work will say, hey, can you work on this project? And you'll say, sure. Can you get done by Friday? Yeah. Without thinking how much work is going to take to get that. And then what happens? We get buried with all of that. If any of you have ever kind of prepared or planned a wedding, you think, oh, it's only these couple things, but then you find out we can get this done then, and then you can't. Right? So this idea of how much work does it take to get something done, it's a natural human condition that we're like, we can get that done and we're optimistic. But project management helps us take away from the optimism that is so important to our success and takes it into a, let's be realistic about that. So that's another reason that I'm suggesting that this is a valuable resource for you. And then finally, when we're using these project management tools, we're writing them down. Study after study shows that we're 42% or more likely to accomplish our goals when we write them down. So if we want to accomplish it in the way we want and in the time we want, we are more likely when we write them down. And there are some studies around this sort of hand to brain mechanism and connection that we manifest these things more in a greater connected way when we actually write them. Remember this lost art of writing. And so it may feel as if when you write down your goals, you'd rather just put fingers to keys and type. And while that is a way, it makes a connection. The strongest connection is to handwrite that down. There's something that there's this neuro connection that's so important when we write things down. Can you put it on, translate it to a software? Absolutely, you can certainly do that. But writing things down it makes them real and manifest for us. So as we're thinking about, well, John, why does this matter to me? Here's the why. Because when we're using project management tools and techniques, we visualize the process, we're more successful. We understand realistically what we're planning to go do and not optimistically, we're more successful. And we write this down rather than just say, I'll keep it in my head, and we're more successful. So hopefully I've got you thinking, and hopefully you are already like, yes, this is what I need to be doing as I'm thinking about all the projects that you have going on in your life. Now, there's this idea, and maybe many of you have heard this, that this new, we're moving to agile, or we're moving to agility, and maybe you've heard this in your own organizations for that. And I just want to spend a second on it because it's very linked to how, when we talk about traditional project management, it's very linked. This idea of an agile mindset is that we focus on a responsiveness to change, a maximization of value, and increasing customer satisfaction. Well, I have good news for you. You're the customer in your own projects. Your life is a project, so you're the customer. So how can we increase your customer satisfaction? If our mindset is focused on welcoming change and being accepting of change when it occurs, and doing only those things that add value to our project, absolutely, that's an opportunity for us. So that's what I want you to think about here when we're connecting with this. Connect our mindset to this. I'm going to welcome change. I want to do these things that add value. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm, as my customer, am satisfied. But take it one step further. If you're planning a vacation for your family, right, we need to think about, well, how do we make sure that their value is maximized and their satisfaction is taken care of? We'll use all of these things we're talking about today to help achieve that. Okay, so just again, a nice aside for that. Happy to talk more about that as we kind of go and get going on it. So we're going to talk about today, when we think about projects, we think about them, and really there are 5 main project phases. Initiation, which is we come up with an idea, we think about we're going to get started on it. That's initiating. Planning is all the work that we do inside of that to get ready for that. Executing is we're going to now go begin to implement the project. We're going to go do our work and get ready for it, do all things we need to do. And then monitoring, controlling is a phase that happens concurrently with execution. That is how we say, well, how do we know that the project is doing what we want it to do? That it's on time, that our costs are controlled, and all these things that we need to be thinking about. We monitor and control that, which happens at the same time as our execution. And then we close out the project. Remember, one of the earliest things I talked about is that a project is temporary. It's meant to be temporary, meaning we close it and begin again. So during this workshop, we're going to talk about initiation and planning. Most specifically, this is how we'll spend our time, because this is the most important elements of that. Because if we spend our time in our planning process and we're detailed about it, and we write it down, and we visualize the process, we realistically think of how long does something take, we can be much more successful in our execution. And monitor controlling takes care of itself, right? It's those projects that aren't planned that have difficulty during execution and challenges way more than those who spend the time to plan. So be thinking about how you can plan for that. Now, this is a bit academic, but I like for you to think about it because it draws an important element for you to think about. When we have a project, we have this idea in our project management world of this concept called a triple constraint. Triple constraint means that we think about our key elements of our scope. What are we going to do in our project? Our time, how long do we have to do it? And the cost, how much does it cost for us to do our project? There's this idea that they are all intertwined, that they are linked in a way, that says that if we make a change to one, we naturally will influence the others and change the shape of them as well. So let me give you an example. If you ask me, hey, I want to go on this project, I want to go on this vacation, but I want to now add all of these different events while we're on vacation, what might that increase for you? Your cost. If I want to add all these different events, I'm going to probably increase the cost because I didn't have that originally planned in my scope. The other thing too is that it influences now the time, because then maybe you had time for other things that's now being eaten away. So this idea of the triple constraint is, remember, if we pull on one of these levers, if we change the cost, if we change our time, then we make that more difficult for others. I'm sorry, we make that more difficult for when we change one or the other. I don't know if we can reach out to Nancy. If she could turn off that video, the way she's moving around, it'd be helpful for me. Thank you for that, Nancy. Sorry about that. As you're going through the house, we're getting the view of it. And so thanks, Nancy. So as we're thinking about this idea, scope, time, and cost, what's in the middle of all of those is our quality, how well something is done in our project. And we evaluate this idea, but maybe you haven't thought of quality as an important component of your project, but we think about it all the time. We go on vacation. If our flight is delayed, impacting our time, if our cost is significantly more and we impact that, but we have a great time on our vacation, the quality is high on our vacation, we forget about those other elements. So we as humans and working on our project, we can accept sometime an influence to our scope, a reduction of our time, an increase in cost of our project, if our quality is high. And so while we're thinking about a triple constraint, in reality, it's these three working in concert, all to achieve the quality that we want. So this is this concept. Remember, if you have someone saying, part of your project team, might be your family, might be your friends, and they want to do something that adds more scope, say, we can add more scope, we can do more, but we now are going to change our time and our cost. It's part of the triple constraints. I heard it in my Franklin Alumni Workshop. And you can use this, I hope you do. But remember, at the end of the day, we succeed when we have a satisfied customer, which is the quality element. And that satisfied customer is typically you. Okay? All right, so here's another way to think about it, and this is just a fun chart, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we have three types of jobs: cheap, quick, and good. You can have any of the two. What I want you to think about is, how can you achieve imperfect balance so that you get all three? The scope that you want, in the time that you want, with the cost that you can live with a quality that makes it important for you. Okay? So as we're going, let's keep talking about this. So in my project management world, we use a variety of plans. Remember, the planning process is critical for our success. Many times we just want to start and take off running and go execute on our project. And if I can just get you to take a couple things away from today, especially the following: take one step back and do your planning. Remember, visualize the process by doing your planning so you don't commit a planning fallacy and be overly optimistic. We use all of these plans here today. We're going to talk about a scope and time and cost plan, a quality plan. These are all us visualizing the process and documenting it. The reason that this is important, as I've said from the earliest beginnings of this workshop, is that helps us be more successful. So let's get into it here. As we think about it here, what is our scope statement? So when we think about our project, I'm going to do a new project. I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to build a house. I'm going to go get another degree at Franklin. You have many opportunities for degree opportunities. Think about those. So when a scope of a project is simply, what is the project going to do? And what is it not going to do? These are key elements here to think about so that we know we will do this, but we won't be able to do that. The reason that's important is so that we have a realistic understanding of what is the scope of our project and what is elements that are in it. Now, this doesn't lock you in to say I can only do these items, but it's realistic to share with your project team, whether you're the project team or it's you and your family or you and your family and friends or whoever that might be, the project team. We all understand, here's what we're doing and here's what we're not doing. Can you see the value of explaining that so someone doesn't have any assumption, that they understand, here's what we're doing with this project. This is the scope of it. If we want to do more, we might have to have a different project. We might have to kick something off new or a different phase or something like that. Okay. Now, this idea of what goes into the scope statement. So a major deliverable is, what are we going to achieve? What are those things we want to do? Write them down. As I mentioned before, we want to eliminate any assumptions so that people understand what we're doing in scope. And many of you may heard me say this before, but an assumption is something that we believe to be true until proven otherwise. And when we're proven otherwise, it becomes a fact. Now, we don't have to like the fact. It doesn't have to be good or bad. There isn't a value judgment assigned with an assumption. It's just, here's what we assume will happen. If that happens, it becomes a fact. If it doesn't happen or something changes that, then that becomes also a fact, right? So think about here, what are we doing? Here's the assumptions. Our flight's going to land on time. We're going to have our luggage. Our hotel's going to be great. All these things happen. Weather's not going to influence what we're going to do. And then we also think about, well, what are the constraints? A way to think about constraints is, how much time do we have? I would love to go on an unlimited vacation to Hawaii. I don't have unlimited time for my Hawaii vacation. Aaron won't let me have all the time I want off, right, Aaron? And so that's a constraint. Also, there's a financial constraint. Many times our projects have a financial constraint about that. It's the right thing to do in our scope statement to identify that and document it. What can't we do? Perfectly fine to do that. Okay, and then our success criteria, which is, how do we know we're satisfied? Think about our quality. What makes a great vacation? What makes building this house that we want to do, right? All these things. What's my success criteria if I want to go pursue my master's degree or my doctorate degree? How am I measuring success? Okay, so as we're thinking about this, this is a first important element to identify these key pieces of your scope before you move on to the rest of the project. Before we can do that, however, we have to think about who are the stakeholders on our project. A stakeholder is anyone who has an interest in the project. Now notice, I didn't say an interest in the project succeeding, just an interest in the project. The harsh reality is sometimes our family and friends aren't supportive of our projects and the ideas and things that we want to go to do. So they're interested in it, but not necessarily that it's going to be a success. And so that's as realistic for us to think about, which is, okay, who's interested in the project? The reason I need to know is because, do I have to inform them? Do I have to consult them? Do I have to get their permission or agreement on something? Who are my stakeholders? An important thing to identify when you're thinking about what's the scope of your project. Which leads us to the creation of this idea of a task plan. Now, this is another technical definition, but it's fun to think about, which is, a work breakdown structure is simply a hierarchical decomposition of the total scope of the work to be carried out. Well, that's a mouthful to say. What are we going to do on the project? Let's take a look at what that means. An example here gives us a picture, gives us a way better way to be thinking about it, which is, here is a sample work breakdown structure, or WBS, we say in project management world, that says we're going to plan for our wedding party. And so we need to think about, okay, if we're planning a party for our wedding, we need to think about the following things. We need to think about, who are the guests? What furniture do we need? What's the reception, right? What are the refreshments like? These are just the big chunks of work we have to do. When you're creating a work breakdown structure, all you're saying in my project is, what are the big chunks of work I have to do? And what are some of those elements underneath there? Now notice we haven't said, go identify the budget, go select a menu, go select a caterer. That hasn't happened yet. We're simply getting a sense of how much is inside this project. This is visualizing the process for this wedding party. Make sense? As we're thinking about this here, this gives us a great idea to say, okay, what are the things, and this list may continue to grow. It's not static. You may grow or take things off as you go. But this gives you a first realistic view of what's the work to be done when we're planning a wedding party. The reason that this is important is because it is going to lead us naturally to the next set of things that we're going to do, but this helps define our scope. So our scope statement was we're planning this wedding party, but reality is beneath that, here's all the things we need to be thinking about. And there's much more below every one of these, isn't it? If you take a look at caterer, that probably has a dozen other tasks to do, including identifying potential caterers, visiting potential caterers, taste testing them, identifying their availability, right? Finding out the budget, doing all the things that help us identify where we are in this task. But a work breakdown structure gives us the high level of those tasks to help us get a sense of what we need to do. Okay. So the reason that's important is because now we're going to take all of that and begin to say, this is good information, but I need more. I need to continue planning. And I need to continue planning by creating my task plan. I'm sorry, my task plan, my time plan, which is taking all those tasks we identified, defining those activities, well, what do they look like? Identify, well, how long does some of these things take? And then put them in the order that they take. Now, the good news is we do all of this sort of work in our head naturally on small things, don't we? If our idea is as a family, we're going to go to dinner tonight, right? We're going to go out to dinner. It's a special project. Well, we think about how long does it take to get there? Is there a wait at the restaurant? Where do we want to go? What kind of food do we want? And then what order do we have to go do those in? We do this all the time on our own project decision making. But this is to help you formalize on those projects that aren't as easily done in your head. And so a task plan is interesting. And here's one. This is just an example. There are tons of them out there. But this is for our wedding. You can see here are some of our things that we broke down. We have to get our guests. We order invitations. We have to get our restaurant. We have to identify that. The wedding chapel. We have to find accommodations. What's our transportation? We have to get wine, et cetera, et cetera. And I like to tell this story because when my wife and I were getting married, she was like, there's so much to do. And I said, I've got this. And I created a project plan for our wedding. So I've lived this, just something very similar. And what's so interesting is that, people sort of laughed at it, but it was the simplest process once we had our plan. And if we had something new, we need to do this, I add it to the plan. Let's go figure out how long that takes. Let's sequence that and put that in there. So these life events that can be stressful don't have to be when you've done all your planning. And so here, this just gives us a sense of what order must they be done in? When do they start? When do they finish? Right? Giving us a sense of how long something takes. This is very simple. Now, this view here is in Microsoft Project, but it can be done anywhere, especially just writing it out. You could absolutely just handwrite these things out and do that. A lot of times students like to use Excel. That's a great tool to use that. So if you want to use Excel and you're comfortable with that, you can do that. The key is that you're not locked into a particular tool to make this work. Handwrite this all out. It works great. In the end, what matters is that you do the planning process and create a task list with durations, how long something's going to take, and then start sequencing them, say what order do we need to do them in. Sometimes tasks are done together, sometimes they're split up, all of that, okay? The reason that this is, again, important is because as you're thinking about this, what does this help eliminate from earlier on? The planning fallacy, right? Is tied to the planning fallacy of we tend to be overly optimistic because it's our human nature to say, oh, we can get that done in this time. We have time. And we probably don't unless we realistically know the duration of some of these things. Now, you may be thinking, well, John, how do I know the duration of these tasks? How do I know when I'm figuring this sort of thing out? And you showed me a slide earlier that said, I need to estimate activity durations. How do I know? Well, a way for you to know is to ask others. Historically, how long does something take, right? Use expert judgment. That's a great tool in the project management world. And who are the experts? Anyone who has experience with it. We use expert judgment today for just about everything, don't we? We go online and we look for reviews. That's a form of expert judgment. is this product good? What are people saying about it? We use this term, and this is where this growth of online reviews has been such a help to all of us, because we get a sense of, oh boy, this got bad reviews. I should step away from this thing. We use expert judgment to also help us identify, well, how long is something going to take? And I can get this idea when I ask others. Okay, so as you're thinking about this here, let's follow our journey. We've identified what's the project, the scope, what do we want to do? What's involved in all of those sort of things, or major deliverables, any constraints, any assumptions we're making. And now then we turn our attention to creating our work breakdown structure to say, okay, well, now what are all the tasks that have to go in there from the scope idea? We start getting this idea, we put them in this list. We get, okay, here are durations, here's how long things take, but we still don't have a complete picture yet, do we? We're missing a few important elements to know if we can actually go and execute this project successfully. And one of those things, this idea of a cost plan, how much is it going to cost? Right, when we plan for the cost on a project, we establish our sort of policy and documentation for planning, managing, and controlling costs. Because unless you have an unlimited budget, which I don't know that many or any of us do, we're working under some constraint that has to do with some financial constraint. So it's important to understand, how much money do we have? What's the cost of this? And cost is generally described as money, but it's also can be, other things, resources and things. And then, excuse me, this idea that who makes the decision on that? Right? How do we decide how much we're spending? If we have something that goes over our plan, how do we decide for that? If something's under our cost plan, what do we do with that money? How do we manage it? So being clear and concise and understanding those things, especially when you have other stakeholders. For those who have partners and spouses, we have another member, a key stakeholder who probably has influence on how much we spend, true? And as a result of that, when on these projects, we have to be, again, realistic and be connected to how much something will absolutely cost. And we know, do we have any flexibility for that? Buying a house as a project is one of those things. Have you ever seen any of those house hunter shows? They always say, what's the key question they always end with is, well, what's my budget? Because that's really drives, first of all, what we can look at. If it's unlimited, I'll show you everything. If it's constrained, then let's go look at those things that fit within that budget. Then now we back into these other things that matter to you. Okay, same way with any of our projects that we're doing is identifying how we're going to control cost and what we're going to do that here. So as we talked about here, estimate the cost of that. Where do we get that? Historical cost, expert judgment, look online, that sort of thing, determine our budget, and then begin to say, let's control those costs, make sure that we're keeping things in line. Otherwise, our triple constraint, if our cost constrains something, what must we do to our project? Generally, cut out scope. If something costs too much, we don't get it for our project, we have to back it down. This happens all the time in our normal project management lifestyle, right? And here's just another quick example. This is, again, these aren't that fancy of examples because this doesn't have to be overly fancy. You're welcome to create a cost plan that is way more complex. And many of you, it may speak to you to do that. You're like, I can't wait to open up my Excel workbook and start creating a cost plan. And if that works for you, it does. And if something more simple like this example works, then that's what you do. All we're putting down here is, here's the average cost, here's the expenses, and we're identifying there, if the average cost was just about $29,000, that was probably my budget, thinking how much I'm going to spend, how much do I have if I back into that? That's work I can do and be thinking about. So these are just some fun things to be thinking about. So our scope, our time, and our cost. Now, one thing that's interesting is this idea of a quality plan. And this is where I want to just spend a couple of minutes, because it's one of those things that we forget how much something cost over time. We forget how long it took to get, if in the end, what we have, we're satisfied with. So this idea of, are we satisfied, becomes more important, because if you get it on time, and exactly at the cost or less than you thought you were going to pay, and it's what you said you wanted, the scope, but it's a poor quality, you don't want it or use it, or it leaves you with a sense that you didn't enjoy it, then that's bad quality. So this idea of quality is, this, and here's just a nice definition, the degree to which a set of characteristics fulfills requirements. Well, who decides the requirements? Well, you do. You're the project manager of your own life and those around you. So you get to maybe a partnership with stakeholders. Well, how do we know that we're satisfied? Right. So another way to say it is quality is how well something works. Does it do what it's supposed to do as well as what you expect it to do? So as you're thinking about this, goes back to documenting this, writing it down, having a discussion. Let's be clear. What do we want from this project? Does it work? Will it work in the way that we want it to work for us? Whether that's buying a house, going on vacation, starting a degree, anything like any project that we do, it's important that we talk about it and document it. Now, one of the things if I could see all of you non-verbally, I bet you're probably saying, well, this is a lot of writing. And I want to say it actually isn't. Because while I'm presenting this in a sequential manner, you're creating these things somewhat concurrently. So it's really, hey, let's talk about our scope. We're writing it down, and you're writing down in whatever level of refinement that you have at the moment you're creating it. You have another opportunity to continue to refine that document continuously. Because as you get more information, you add it to it. If there's a change of scope, time, or cost, then you change that as well. So be thinking about this idea that this isn't too much work because you can't afford the cost that hits your project when you don't do proper planning. The impact of not proper planning is way significantly worse than for you to give the time to plan it ahead of time. Okay, so be thinking about that. So again, it's a simple documentation of this. What do we want to do? How well do we want to work? What are we satisfied from a quality perspective? So we have this idea, triple constraints: scope, time, cost, quality in the center, how we want to do it. But that's not our only plans that we need to be thinking about when we're getting ready to sort of manage our project. Another important one here is this idea of a risk plan. So a risk to start with is a possibility that an unwanted circumstances that will occur that will result in some loss. That something will happen that will influence our scope, time, cost, or quality. So we have to begin a process of risk management identification. We identify the risks, think about, well, what's the response to the risk if it's going to happen or going to occur, in order to minimize that the likelihood the risk will occur, or to be prepared for the impact should it potentially happen. Now, this is a critical piece of your project planning. Your risk planning is a critical piece of that. Now, a risk is something that could happen. An issue is a risk that has happened. So from a definition standpoint, a risk is something that could occur. It may or may not occur, but it's important that we plan for it. So here's a real world example of my risk management planning that I do when I travel. If you've ever had a flight canceled, what happens? You're at the airport, or delay, the flight gets canceled. And what happens to everyone sitting around there? They all take off sprinting to that one gate agent, form a line that's going to take 2 hours to get through to get rebooked on the flight. Here's my risk response to that. I plan if the flight is canceled. Before my flight, I have already programmed in my phone the 800 number to the customer service desk of whichever airline I'm traveling. And so when that happens, I pick up my phone, I start dialing, because now there's a call center of tons of people that can do the exact same thing as that one gate agent. And then I can just go, I'm free to walk about the airport, go get a Cinnabon, that's delicious. I can go do whatever I need to do because I'm getting already rebooked much quicker than the person at the back of that line. And the reason I use this example, because this has happened multiple times. And I don't panic. I don't run to that one poor overworked gate agent who can only rebook one person at a time as everyone else is getting mad and stewing about it. You've already got it programmed in your phone because you planned for this risk, and your risk response said, I will call this number, here's how I'll do it, and you get rebooked. I've even done that when I've been in line at traveling at a holiday time and recognizing I'm not going to get through this check-in process or security in time. And I changed the flight while I was walking through that line to see, can I get here or can I get there? This is a great way to think about it. And so I want to show you an outline or a template that you can use for all of your risk planning. It's really, I think, really important to go this. So we're back to our wedding example for just a moment. But in this idea, we identified two risks. And the risk is that might have rain on the day of our event, right? Which we don't want to have happen. And we say, so if we're going across the horizontal, our risk, our consequence, our chance of occurrence, the impact if it occurs, and what's our response plan? Those are the key things I want you to think about. So our risk is we're going to have rain on the day of our event. What happens if we do that? Well, we might have low attendance, people won't show up. We might incur financial loss if we do that. What's our chance of occurrence, low, medium, or high? Well, in this case, we're evaluating it as it's probably medium. If it's in Columbus, it could be it could be any precipitation that could happen just about any time of the year, it seems like. We can have rain, hail, snow, ice, sun. We don't know what's going to happen. My wife and I got married in October, and on the Saturday before we got married, it was 75 and sunny. And the Saturday after we got married, it was 75 and sunny. And on the Saturday we got married, in between those, it was 30 and gray and drizzly. It was terrible from a weather perspective. So who knows around Columbus? So this idea that chance of occurrence could happen, medium in this case, potentially. What's the impact if it happens? High. If this risk becomes an issue, it rains on the event. It's medium that it could, but if it does happen, it's high. What do we do in this case? Well, one, we're going to check our weather forecast 2 days before the event. That's our trigger action to know if it's going to happen. But the other thing is we've already thought about our risk response, which is we reserve an indoor place right now. Because the wrong time to reserve an indoor place is the day before you need it or the day you need it. So this gets you ahead, right? This planning ahead of time, visualizing the process and writing it down. We reserve an indoor space now. We get volunteers to help set up. If this happens, and everyone can be part of your risk plan, here's what we do. Okay, another potential opportunity is that we have road construction that we may have reduced attendance because people may not want to deal with it. Those that surround Columbus, living on the Orange Barrel Highway, of course, they're everywhere we're going. We can't get away from our construction, and the impact is going to be high. So what are we going to do? Well, let's go find out what the schedule is. That's available to us as citizens. And then we're going to identify alternate routes and announce them to the guests ahead of time. Right? A wonderful thing about project management planning is that we leave nothing to chance that we've thought of, right? We try to think of everything. And this risk planning is so critical that that's why I'm spending so much time on it, because I want you to be thinking about that to say, okay, I need to think about what's the risk, what could happen, what's the impact if it happens, what's the likelihood it could occur. If it's low, we may do nothing about the risk. We may not worry about it at all. But if it's medium or high, we better build a response plan to say, what will we do if it occurs? Because we know the impact is probably also high. If there's a low risk and a low impact, move on, accept it. Don't do anything about it. But once you start getting up to, it's a medium risk of occurrence, it's a medium impact if it happens, it's best to prepare. One thing that Aaron didn't say, part of my background is I'm also a retired lieutenant colonel from U.S. Army. And we always had this idea that proper preparation prevents poor performance. And the risk planning is exactly what we're doing here. We're preparing, not planning in this case. Did you hear me say it? Proper preparation. So planning is, oh, I should think about getting an indoor space. Preparation is doing the work. So when we're doing our risk planning, we're identifying all this, and then we do our response. We go and prepare it. Okay. So for any of our projects here is that, and here's another example. If you're thinking about an MBA program and you get stuck in that program as you're working through it, your response is, well, my life has impacted me. I can't start or finish right now. What's your response? Well, that risk has become an issue. You've already thought about who you'll contact, how you'll take a delay, what might you do? All those things, this preparation is really critically important. And I'll tell you that once you begin to do some of this risk management planning in your head and then writing it down, it becomes very second nature. Now, I don't have to write a plan and tell myself I'm traveling on this airline, write down their 800 number if that could happen. Same with your rental car. This has happened multiple times as well. This just happened going out to Phoenix, where I showed up, they had no cars, all gone. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let me go think what I can do. Well, who else can I get a rental car from? Rather than running over there, I was like very quickly reserving one, walked up at a different car rental because I already had this established with them, walked up, got my car and drove away where there's still a line of people scrambling for a car, right? So this helps your project be successful. So risk planning is a really important thing to be aware of and have prepared for and thought about that. Okay. So as we're doing this, I want to talk about this idea of a communications plan for a second, which is communications plan is this, well, who do we need to tell, right? It's an approach for how we're talking about our communication to all of our stakeholders. And this idea that some of our stakeholders need communication on a regular basis, and it's important that we are keeping them informed about our project. So as an example, when I was planning my wedding, my spouse and I we communicated frequently, clearly daily, many times during the day, sometimes about that. But it was like, what do you need to know? What do I need to know? What do we both need to know, right? Think about it from that perspective. Same with any project that you're doing. If you're going on vacation or you're building a house or planning a wedding, same thing here. Who needs to know? What information is needed? How are we going to communicate it? What just came up on the screen is the communication methods. How are we communicating something? Are we calling everybody? Is it a group text? Are we putting it out? If it's something at work, are we just putting it out on a SharePoint site? Are we putting it out on a shared document? Are we posting it on Facebook? Do we have a register? How are we communicating? This is important that we know how we are communicating with others. What are we doing that? Another thing to know about when we're this idea of how we're communicating about our project is this idea of frequency. How often are we communicating this? Sometimes in our work life, we do a weekly status report, let's say, or a monthly business review. Other times we have a daily issues log. Same with our projects that are in our own life, which is think about this idea of how often do I need to let people know, my stakeholders, progress on this project? So what do I need to tell them? How do I need to tell them? And when do I need to tell them? These are the bases of the communication plan. Again, the key is the format is not important. What is important is that you've thought about it. You've identified how you want to go about this idea of communicating on your project, and that you're just sort of formalizing it in that way. Now, if it's a family vacation, going on vacation, the formality is probably not as important, but think about how many times you've gone on vacation, especially with an extended family, that things get crossed. Someone shows up at the wrong time. Someone has their feelings hurt because they weren't part of this thing or that thing or this decision. A communication plan that's clearly laid out to everybody helps eliminate and address all those things. So what information is needed? How often is it needed? And then by what method are you going to share it with them? And we might have multiple methods. Okay. And then finally, the audience, as I mentioned about. So this is just, again, another simple example to be thinking about here, which is what are we talking about in communications plan, which is what information is going out. This is more work-based. So again, a progress report, an updated schedule, a course invitation, evaluation report. And then when does it go out? What mode am I sending it in, right? That's our communication method, a meeting, an email, a text, whatever that may be. And then how frequently. That's the fun thing is that when we're thinking about this, we're just putting it out there. And if you've ever thought, I mean, again, I'm encouraging you to write it down, but the fun part is just sharing with everybody the following information. Here's what I need. Here's what we're going to communicate. What do you need to hear about? How do you want to receive it? How frequently do you want to receive it? And does it need to go to anybody else? In the project management world, we do this all the time as a natural piece of who's getting what. And many times I have to tailor my communication and my team's communication depending on the stakeholders that we have. Some of them want to just get it via email. Some want to have it Again, explain to them. Some like just put it on a site and I'll go get it, put it on a database, that sort of thing. Let me know it's updated. You decide on your project what you're communicating, what method you'll communicate it, how frequently you communicate it, and who does it go to. Okay, makes sense? Okay. So we've talked about the following things today during our workshop here. Our scope statement, what do we want to do? What are we not going to do? Our time plan, which is what are all those elements that goes into our time, right? We think about our scope statement creates our work breakdown structure. Our work breakdown structure creates our task plan. Once we have our task plan that talks about durations and dates, all that, we add in our cost. How much do each of these things cost? So we begin building our cost plan. Our quality plan is just that, discussion and description of how well do we want to work? How do we know? Does it conform with the requirements that we have? How do we know? If we're going on vacation, what makes a good time on a vacation? Right? Let's identify that. Many times, and I don't know if this resonates with any of you, but sometimes we go on vacation and we're just go. That isn't a vacation for me. My quality metric is having nothing to do, right? Just having no plan, no script. I don't have to be anywhere at any time. Let's just go relax, right? So what's your right quality plan? And then we have this idea of a risk plan. Risk plan is, remember this, take this away, hopefully, this idea that a risk can occur, that's some unwanted circumstance. It hasn't happened yet, but it could happen. What's the likelihood it may happen? What's the impact if it does? And what's our response? What will we do if this happens? Take the preparation we're ready for. And then this idea of a communication plan is, okay, now here's what we're doing. Here's how we're going to put it all together. Here's who we're communicating to, and bringing that all around so that everyone can kind of understand your plan for communicating it. Because, and we've talked about this before, but sometimes we may even have this, maybe another idea to talk about communication styles. It's a great topic, Aaron. This idea that so many things happen. We have all this planning and preparation, but if we don't communicate it properly, then we may fall down on that. We may fail on that and not have the success that we want. So the idea is to take all these different plans, take the time, visualize the process, again, identify how long something takes, so we're not just optimistic, but we're realistic, and then you write it all down. So as I mentioned here, here are some things, here's your call to action. So here's what I want you to be thinking about next. First of all, think about the way that you can use the project management tools, techniques in your own life. Do you have a project coming up? In fact, this Labor Day weekend is a great one. Many times we have projects, clean out the garage, clean out the basement. We're going to go get something done, right? That's our project. We're going to paint the room we've been meaning to paint, right? So think about, are there small ways that you can do that? Practice on small projects. Right. Another interesting thing, and this is in the lower left hand or lower right hand side, is that all the things we talked about today scale to the size of the project. So here's what I mean is that all the same plans we talked about applied if you're going on vacation to if we're sending a new crew to the moon. Right there, for our Artemis launch that's happening, I think tomorrow's NASA's launch, that they're using all of these same things just on a much larger scale. So it all works. So no project is too small and no project is too large. They're universal. And then finally, use what works for you. If you're like, I don't think I need a communication plan, it's just me and my partner. Perfect, that's fine. But maybe they've got questions and maybe they want to hear more frequently than you're telling them. So it's worth at least asking. So use what works in all of these plans. So that's really, again, another key to success as you're thinking about it. And then this idea that your life is a project, and maybe I should have started with ahead of time, which is, I think of your life and our life in this way that we have these different dimensions too, when we're thinking about ourselves. And that first, as Franklin alumni, this idea about we're pursuing our bachelor's and master's and even doctorate degrees, right? And then thinking about our professional development, our personal development. What are we interested in improving on? Maybe that is our emotional intelligence. Maybe that's a crucial conversation. Maybe it's learning a particular skill. That these are all projects. Many times in our professional life, we're seeking out certification and thinking about, well, what is that? But it doesn't have to be professional life to have certification, right? We can be certified in lots of different things that we are interested in. Pursue those interests and passions in your life that matter to you. And then finally, a project to think about is many of us are already active in our communities, whether that's our local community or our faith-based community, wherever we're engaged in today. Think about how we can help with those projects by giving of our time and talents there. That's and leverage how, if you're working on something, if you're a volunteer at one of your service communities, can you help improve the execution of those events by leveraging these project management tools and techniques we talked about today? And as we're wrapping up, and I'm happy to take questions and comments, is that, you know, the only successful project is that delivers on what's supposed to, gets results, and meets stakeholders' expectations. I love the thought of that, because they don't succeed by accident. They succeed by successful and quality project management. So I'm delighted to have spent the time today. I'm so grateful for all of you, but love to hear questions or feedback or comments, anything that anyone has. Again, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this today.
Sherry, I know, excuse me, our Executive Director of Community Relations just popped on. I do have two comments. And while we wrap up here, we'll take some questions in the box. But John, what I love is practical and impactful. Every single time you do this, very practical, very impactful. And then the other comment I would like to make, the 4 dimensions: education, training, certification, service. We at Franklin have those all for you. If you're ever interested, reach out to us. We have those all in our ability to get you involved with those. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry. I do know we have a few questions, but I know Sherry will wrap some things up here too.
My sincere hello, first of all, to everybody. And John, lovely to see you. My sincere apologies, doctor's appointment that, you know, they're on their schedule, not ours. So Aaron graciously agreed to host, and I tried to pop in quietly. As always, John, you give great advice and things that when you share them, you think, oh yeah, that makes sense. But if you don't do them, they have a huge impact. So I was taking notes, and these are all things that Aaron and I have talked about. We need to make sure we do as we're planning all of our efforts. So thank you so much. I'm gonna hand it back to Aaron to let him go through the questions.
Yeah, we have one question, a lot of great comments, John, that are coming in, but what advice do you have for someone wanting to get their PMP certification? What's the best way to get started?
So that's a great question. I appreciate that. One of the things that I would do is connect with your local chapter of PMI, because they typically, and we do in the Columbus, Ohio chapter, host exam preparation courses to get started with that. If you haven't already, I don't recommend just doing that on your own. And the local chapter is one way to do it. Lots of other professional training organizations host PMP, but doing that on your own is really very difficult. It's great to join a learning community to get connected with that. And again, if you're in Central Ohio, our local chapter at our local chapter, Central Columbus PMI chapter is a great place to get started for that.
Great. Again, thank you everyone for attending. You guys all make these events great as well. And with that, we will talk to you the next time we have an event. Check out your email for a post-event survey. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.